Have you ever wondered what it's like to live in a world of eternal darkness? I didn't always know either, until one day when my eyes stopped working. The sounds and smells became my only connection to the world around me. Every whisker, every paw step became crucial as I learned to navigate through the shadows. The streets of the city became a maze of uncertainty and fear. The rough concrete beneath my paws told stories of where I was, while the rumbling of cars nearby sent shivers through my small body. The scent of exhaust fumes mixed with the aroma of food from nearby restaurants, creating a confusing symphony of smells. The constant drone of the city felt overwhelming, especially now that I couldn't see what was coming. Sometimes I would hide in small spaces just to feel safe. The alley behind the restaurant became my temporary home, where scraps of food occasionally appeared. The cook would sometimes leave leftovers, though I never saw their face, only heard their footsteps. The smell of fish and chicken would guide me to these precious meals. The cardboard box I found became my shelter from the rain and cold. Every day was a new challenge as I learned to rely on my other senses. The vibrations through the ground warned me of approaching danger. My whiskers became my guides, helping me avoid obstacles in my path. The wind carried messages about nearby animals and humans. My ears constantly twitched, tracking movements around me. Morning brought the chaos of delivery trucks and shouting voices. Afternoon meant dodging hurried footsteps and rolling carts. Evening brought the sounds of nightlife and different dangers. My world had become a constant exercise in survival, where every moment required complete attention. The other cats in the area didn't understand my condition. They would hiss when I accidentally bumped into them, not realizing I couldn't see them. Some would try to steal my food, knowing I couldn't defend it as well. Others simply avoided me altogether, leaving me in my solitude. The rain was always the worst. It masked other sounds and made everything smell different. During storms, I would curl up as tightly as possible in my box, hoping it wouldn't get too wet. The thunder would make me jump, and lightning was just another sound without meaning now. Each passing day made me more aware of how vulnerable I had become. Simple tasks like finding food or clean water had turned into major challenges. Crossing even small distances felt like navigating through a battlefield. The world had become both smaller and more terrifying. I learned to recognize the regulars in my alley by their footsteps and voices. There was the old man who shuffled past every morning, the young woman who clicked by in high heels at noon, and the newspaper delivery person before dawn. These patterns became my calendar, helping me track time. The summer heat made the pavement burn my paws, while winter's chill seeped into my bones. I had to constantly search for new shelter, as my cardboard home would frequently get destroyed by rain or replaced by garbage. Each season brought its own set of challenges to overcome. Sometimes, kind voices would stop near me, making soft cooing sounds. But I had learned to be wary. Not everyone who sounded kind had good intentions. Some would try to grab me, causing me to flee in panic, often bumping into things as I ran. The constant hunger was my companion, along with the gnawing fear of being too exposed. Finding food without sight meant relying on luck and my nose. Sometimes I would go days without a proper meal, surviving on whatever scraps I could find. The nights were the longest, filled with strange noises and unpredictable dangers. Rats would scurry nearby, dogs would bark in the distance, and occasional fights would break out among other strays. Sleep came in short, nervous bursts, always alert for trouble. My memory of colors and shapes began to fade, replaced by a complex map of sounds and smells. The world became a tapestry of textures. Rough concrete, smooth metal, soft cardboard. Every surface told a story, guided my path, or warned of danger. Each passing day tested my will to survive as I navigated this dark world alone. The city's rhythm became my guide. Morning deliveries, midday rushes, evening quiet. I learned to time my movements with these patterns, finding safer moments to search for food. The wounds from my past had healed, but the scars remained, both physical and emotional. Trust became a luxury I couldn't afford, yet loneliness was a constant ache in my heart. The warmth of a loving home seemed like a distant dream. The alley had its own personality, changing with the weather and time of day. Morning brought the smell of fresh bread from the bakery. Afternoon carried the scent of grilled meat, and evening brought the aroma of garbage being taken out. These scents became my timeline. What I didn't know then was that my life was about to change forever. Looking back, I can see how each challenge had prepared me for what was coming. The darkness had taught me strength, but I was ready for something more. Something in the air felt different that morning. New sounds, new smells, new possibilities. Little did I know that this would be my last day alone in the darkness. Sometimes the biggest changes come when you least expect them. A gentle voice would soon pierce through my world of shadows, bringing with it a promise of something I had long forgotten: hope. But at that moment, I was just another blind cat, trying to survive one day at a time in a world I could no longer see. It happened on a particularly cold morning when everything began to change. The sound of heavy trucks was more intense than usual, and the ground vibrated differently beneath my paws. The familiar alley that had become my home was filled with strange metallic sounds and unfamiliar footsteps. The rats that usually shared the alley with me were running in all directions, their panic clear in their frantic movements. Something was terribly wrong, and every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. I tried to orient myself using the familiar sounds of my alley, but everything was different now. The roar of machinery grew closer and closer, making the ground shake beneath my paws. The comforting smell of the restaurant's kitchen was completely masked by dust and diesel fumes. The cardboard box that had been my shelter for so long was suddenly gone, probably cleared away by whatever chaos was happening around me. I was exposed, vulnerable, and more terrified than I'd ever been. People were shouting words I didn't understand, their voices harsh and urgent. The vibrations grew stronger, and I could feel the air pressure changing around me as large objects moved nearby. My whiskers trembled with each new sensation, overwhelmed by the chaos surrounding me. The few familiar landmarks I had memorized through touch and smell were disappearing one by one. Every step I took seemed to lead to another unknown obstacle or frightening sound. I tried to retreat to my backup hiding spot behind the dumpster, but even that was gone. Metal scraped against concrete as things were being moved and demolished around me. The smell of rust and debris filled my nostrils, making it impossible to track my location by scent. The echoes of construction bounced off the walls, disorienting me completely. I was lost in what had once been my own territory, every direction now feeling equally dangerous. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat as I pressed myself against what felt like a wall. The chaos continued around me, with heavy machinery moving closer and closer. The ground shook so violently that I could barely keep my balance. The air was thick with dust, making it hard to breathe, and the familiar smells that usually guided me were completely gone. I had never felt more alone or more afraid in my life. A sudden crash nearby sent me running blindly forward, my paws scrambling against rough concrete. I had no idea where I was going, only that I needed to escape the terrifying sounds behind me. My whiskers brushed against unfamiliar surfaces as I ran, offering no comfort or guidance. The world had become a maze of noise and danger, with no safe haven in sight. Every direction I turned seemed to lead to another frightening sound or threatening vibration. In my panic, I must have taken a wrong turn because suddenly the ground disappeared beneath my paws. I felt myself falling, tumbling through space with no way to orient myself. The sensation of weightlessness was terrifying, and I yowled in fear as I fell. The impact came suddenly and painfully, sending shock waves through my small body. I landed on something hard and cold, and the pain that shot through my back leg told me something was very wrong. I lay there, unable to move, my body trembling with shock and pain. The construction sounds continued above me, but they seemed more distant now. The air down here was damp and cold, with the musty smell of underground spaces. My injured leg throbbed with every heartbeat, and I could feel something wet and sticky in my fur that I knew must be blood. Everything hurt, and I had no idea where I was or how to get out. Hours passed, or maybe it was days. Time lost all meaning in that dark, cold place. My leg had swollen to twice its size, and every attempt to move sent waves of agony through my body. The hunger and thirst were becoming unbearable, worse than anything I'd experienced before. The damp air made me shiver constantly, and the cold seemed to seep into my very bones. Even breathing hurt, and I began to wonder if this dark pit would become my final resting place. The sounds of construction eventually faded away, replaced by an eerie silence that was almost worse than the chaos had been. The darkness that had been my constant companion since losing my sight now felt more oppressive than ever before. The pain in my leg had settled into a constant throbbing that matched my heartbeat. I could barely move, and the little strength I had left was fading fast. Hope seemed like a distant memory. Water dripped somewhere nearby, its steady rhythm marking time in my underground prison. The air grew colder as night fell, though I could only tell by the changing sounds above. My injured leg had gone from painful to numb, which I knew wasn't a good sign. The hunger gnawing at my stomach had become almost unbearable. Even the rats that I could hear scurrying nearby were too quick for me to catch in my weakened state. Each breath became a struggle as my strength continued to fade. The damp air seemed to settle in my lungs, making each inhale more difficult than the last. The cold had numbed most of my body now, and I could barely feel my paws anymore. The pain was still there, but it felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. I drifted in and out of consciousness, losing track of time completely. Strange dreams began to mix with reality as my mind wandered in my weakened state. I remembered warmth and comfort from some distant past, before the darkness came. The memory of gentle hands and soft voices seemed to float through my consciousness. The line between what was real and what was imagined became increasingly blurred. Sometimes I thought I could hear voices above, but they always faded away like mist. The hunger eventually gave way to a strange sort of emptiness that seemed to hollow out my entire being. My usually sharp senses had dulled to mere whispers of their former strength. The sounds above had become nothing more than a faint murmur, as if the world was slowly fading away. Even the cold didn't seem to matter anymore, as my body had forgotten what warmth felt like. Just when I had given up all hope of rescue, something changed in the air above me. New sounds penetrated my hazy consciousness, different from the construction noise of before. These were softer, more purposeful sounds, accompanied by voices that seemed concerned rather than harsh. A beam of light penetrated my darkness for the first time in days, though I could only feel its warmth on my fur. The voices grew closer, and I could sense movement nearby. In my weakened state, I couldn't even muster the energy to be afraid anymore. The pain in my leg had become a distant memory, replaced by an all-encompassing numbness. The air shifted around me as something or someone approached. For the first time in days, I felt a spark of something that might have been hope. Gentle hands suddenly touched my broken body, and I was too weak to even flinch. The touch was different from anything I'd experienced in my time on the streets. Careful, tender, almost loving. Soft words were spoken above me, though I couldn't understand their meaning. The hands lifted me with surprising gentleness, cradling me against something warm and soft. More voices joined the first, speaking in urgent but quiet tones. I felt myself being moved, wrapped in something soft that blocked out the cold for the first time in days. The pain in my leg flared briefly as I was lifted upward, but the gentle hands never faltered. The warmth of another living being seeped into my cold body, and I found myself relaxing despite my fears. For the first time since falling into that dark pit, I felt something other than pain and fear. The hands that held me were steady and sure, the voice above me soothing and kind. My body might have been broken, but something inside me began to stir. A tiny spark of life that refused to be extinguished. As I was carried away from my underground prison, I didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning of my story. The world above seemed to hold its breath as I was rescued from the darkness. The sounds of the city felt distant and unreal compared to the steady heartbeat of the person holding me. The pain was still there, but it was overshadowed by something new, a feeling I had almost forgotten existed. As consciousness began to fade once again, I realized what it was: hope. The first thing I noticed in my hazy consciousness was the absence of cold and damp. Instead, I felt warmth all around me, soft fabric beneath my body, and gentle hands touching my fur. Strange beeping sounds filled the air, accompanied by unfamiliar chemical smells that made my nose twitch. Voices murmured nearby, their tones hushed but urgent as they moved around me. Something sharp pricked my leg, and then the pain that had been my constant companion began to fade. Time seemed to flow differently in this new place. I drifted in and out of awareness, each awakening bringing new sensations and experiences. The hands that touched me were always gentle, checking my injuries and offering soft words of comfort. The air here was clean and warm, so different from the cold pit where I had nearly lost hope. Sometimes I felt a slight sting, followed by a rush of relief as medicine flowed through my veins. Gradually, my strength began to return, though my injured leg remained immobile and something stiff and strange. The voices around me became more distinct, and I began to recognize different people by their touch and scent. One voice in particular stood out, soft, female, with a gentleness that made me feel safe for the first time in memory. She spent the most time with me, talking in soothing tones as she tended to my needs. Each day brought new progress and challenges. Learning to eat from a bowl again took time, my whiskers guiding me to the unfamiliar containers. The food was unlike anything I'd had before. Rich, nourishing, and always plentiful. Water was clean and fresh, always within reach. The simple luxury of having these basic needs met consistently was almost overwhelming after so long on the streets. The woman, my rescuer, I came to understand, visited me every day. Her scent became familiar and comforting, a mix of flowery soap and something uniquely her own. Her hands were always gentle as she stroked my fur or checked my healing leg. She would sit with me for hours, talking softly about things I didn't understand. But her voice became an anchor in my world of darkness. Other people came and went, their hands professional but kind as they examined me. The beeping machines gradually disappeared, and the sharp smells faded. My leg still hurt, but the pain was different now, more like the ache of healing than the sharp agony of injury. I learned to trust that hands touching me meant help, not harm. One day, everything changed again. The woman's voice was especially excited as she wrapped me in a soft blanket. The familiar sounds and smells of what I now knew was a veterinary clinic faded away as she carried me outside. The air smelled different here. Fresher, with hints of grass and trees I hadn't scented in ages. A car ride followed, frightening at first, but made bearable by her constant reassurance. The engine's vibrations thrummed through my body as we traveled to somewhere new. I pressed close to her, drawing comfort from her steady presence and gentle words. The world was changing again, but this time I wasn't alone. This time someone was guiding me through the darkness. When we finally stopped, new smells and sounds surrounded us. A door opened and closed, and warm air enveloped us. This place was different, quieter, calmer, with the subtle sense of home that I barely remembered from my life before the streets. Her footsteps echoed slightly as she carried me through what must have been several rooms. She set me down gently on something soft, softer than anything I'd felt in years. The surface gave slightly beneath my weight, and a plush blanket surrounded me. Her voice was excited but gentle as she showed me around what I would later learn was my new bed. Everything here smelled like her, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt completely safe. The first few days in my new home were a careful exploration of this strange environment. My whiskers brushed against furniture, legs, and walls as I mapped out my surroundings. The woman was patient, never rushing me as I learned the layout of each room. She kept talking to me, her voice helping me orient myself in this new space. Even without sight, I began to build a mental picture of my new world. Food and water bowls were always in the same place, making them easy to find. The litter box, too, remained constant, allowing me to navigate with confidence to meet my basic needs. Soft rugs provided paths I could feel with my paws, creating highways through the house. Each room had its own unique scent and sound signature, helping me create a map in my mind. Slowly but surely, this strange place began to feel like home. The woman's routine became my routine. She would wake early, and I learned to recognize the sound of her alarm and the shuffle of her morning movements. Her footsteps would lead to the kitchen, where the smell of coffee would soon fill the air. She always checked on me first, with gentle pets and soft morning greetings. These small rituals became the framework of my new life. My leg continued to heal, growing stronger each day. The stiff bandage was eventually removed, and though my gait remained slightly uneven, I could move more freely now. The woman celebrated each small victory with me. My first jump onto the couch, my first climb of the cat tree she had bought. Her joy in my progress was evident in her voice and touch, making me want to try harder each day. Other voices occasionally visited, friends of hers I gathered from their interactions. They would exclaim over me, their tones full of sympathy when they learned my story. But the woman would proudly tell them about my progress, my strength, my resilience. She saw past my blindness and scars to who I really was, and her belief in me gave me confidence I never knew I possessed. The nights were different now, too. Instead of huddling alone in the cold, I slept on a soft bed or, more often, curled up next to the woman. The sound of her breathing became my lullaby, her warmth a constant comfort in my darkness. The fears that had plagued my nights on the street began to fade, replaced by a deep sense of security. As weeks turned into months, I discovered new aspects of life I never knew existed. The woman brought toys that jingled and crinkled, teaching me to play again. She would drag string toys across the floor, the sound and movement awakening my hunting instincts. Even without sight, I learned to pounce and play, finding joy in movement that had once been purely about survival. Each day brought new discoveries and small victories. I learned that windowsills were perfect for napping, the sun warming my fur as I dozed. The sound of birds outside became entertainment rather than tantalization. The woman would open windows, letting fresh breezes carry new scents to explore. My world, rather than shrinking because of my blindness, was expanding in ways I never imagined possible. Like the changing seasons outside, I too was transforming. The scared, broken cat from the construction site was becoming something new, something stronger and braver. The darkness that had once been my prison was now simply part of who I was, no longer defining my entire existence. In this new life, with this gentle woman who had saved me, I was learning that disability didn't mean inability. The woman's love and patience were helping me discover abilities I never knew I had. My other senses had always been sharp, but now they were extraordinary. I could hear her smile in her voice, feel her mood in her footsteps, sense when she needed comfort just as she had comforted me. Our bond grew stronger each day, built on trust and understanding that went beyond the need for sight. Looking back now, from the comfort of my soft bed and loving home, I can hardly believe how much my life has changed. The memory of cold streets and endless darkness seems like a distant nightmare, fading more with each passing day. The woman who saved me, my human, as I've come to think of her, has shown me that life has so much more to offer than mere survival. She's taught me that being different doesn't mean being less. Each morning now starts with gentle scritches behind my ears and her melodious good morning. The routine we've developed brings comfort and security to my day. I've learned to recognize the different sounds her feet make. Slippers mean a lazy day at home, while shoes usually indicate she'll be gone for a while. But she always returns, her familiar, "I'm home" call making my heart leap with joy every single time. My world has expanded beyond anything I could have imagined in my street days. Every room in our home holds new discoveries, even now. The living room couch has become my favorite perch, where I can feel the warmth of sunlight through the window. The kitchen holds delicious smells and the promise of treats. The bedroom is our shared sanctuary, where I sleep curled against her side, safe and content. The constant fear that once ruled my life has been replaced by confidence and curiosity. I've learned that my blindness doesn't have to limit me. It just means I experience the world differently. My whiskers and ears tell me everything I need to know about my surroundings. The vibrations through the floor let me track movement throughout the house. My nose paints pictures more vivid than eyes ever could. Other cats sometimes visit our home, friends of my human who need temporary shelter. At first, their presence made me nervous, memories of street confrontations making me wary. But my human's steady presence helped me learn to socialize again. Now I even enjoy having companions, teaching them that differences don't matter when it comes to friendship. I've become something of a local celebrity in our neighborhood. Visitors often come to meet the miracle cat, as they call me. They marvel at how confidently I navigate our home, how I play with toys, and how I always know where my human is. Their amazement makes my human proud. I can hear it in her voice when she tells my story. We've become ambassadors of sorts, showing others that challenges can be overcome. The nightmares of falling in dark pits still come sometimes, but they're rare now. When they do, my human seems to know instinctively. She'll wake and gather me close, her gentle hands stroking my fur until the fear subsides. These moments of comfort remind me how far I've come from that terrified, injured cat in the construction site. Love, it seems, is the best medicine of all. My injured leg healed stronger than anyone expected. Though I still have a slight limp, it doesn't slow me down anymore. I can run and play, jump on furniture, and even climb the cat tree my human bought, especially for me. Each level has different textures and toys, creating a playground I can navigate entirely by touch and sound. She thinks of everything, my human. The best part of my new life isn't the comfortable bed or the regular meals, though those are wonderful. It's the constant companionship, the understanding that I'm not alone anymore. My human has learned to communicate with me in ways that don't need sight, gentle touches, specific sounds, even certain movements that signal her intentions. We've developed our own language of love and trust. I've learned that family isn't about seeing each other. It's about feeling connected in your heart. My human and I share a bond that goes beyond the physical. She sees me for who I am, not what I'm missing. In her eyes, I'm not a blind cat who needs help, but a survivor who has shown incredible strength. Her belief in me has helped me believe in myself. Food isn't just about survival anymore. It's become something to enjoy. My human discovered I have a particular fondness for the sound of treats shaking in their bag. She's taught me to do simple tricks, proving that blindness doesn't mean I can't learn. The click of the treat container and her delighted praise make every small achievement feel like a major victory. The changing seasons bring new experiences to explore. Summer breezes carry exciting scents through open windows. Fall brings crisp air and crunchy leaves to play with. Winter means curling up in warm blankets together. Spring fills our home with fresh air and the sounds of birds returning. Each season has its own texture, its own music, its own joy to discover. My human has started sharing my story with others through something she calls social media. She tells me many people are inspired by our journey together. Sometimes she reads me the messages people send, their words full of encouragement and support. It makes me proud to think that my experience might help other animals find homes. Every cat deserves to know the kind of love I've found. The construction site where I nearly lost everything has become a distant memory. That dark pit that almost claimed my life led me to the brightest future I could imagine. My human says everything happens for a reason, and though I don't understand all her words, I understand the truth in her heart. Sometimes the worst moments in life can lead to the best changes. Other cats from the streets sometimes find their way to our yard. My human always puts out food and water for them, and I can hear her making phone calls to help them find homes too. She says I inspired her to help others, and I feel proud knowing our story continues to create positive change in the world. Life has taken on a rhythm I never knew was possible. Each day brings its own small adventures, its own moments of joy and discovery. The darkness that once seemed like a prison has become simply another part of who I am. My other senses have grown so acute that sometimes I forget I can't see. In many ways, I feel more aware of the world than ever before. The fear and loneliness that once defined my existence have been replaced by love and security. My human has shown me that disabilities don't define us, they just make us unique. Through her eyes, I've learned to see myself not as a broken or incomplete cat, but as a whole and worthy being. She calls me her miracle, but the real miracle is the love we share. My story isn't about overcoming blindness. It's about discovering that life's greatest gifts don't require sight to appreciate. It's about learning that help doesn't mean weakness, that difference doesn't mean less, and that love doesn't need eyes to see into the heart. My human and I have built a life together that proves happiness comes in many forms. The street cat I once was would never have believed this life was possible. From the depths of despair to the heights of joy, my journey has taught me that hope never truly dies. Even in the darkest moments, light can find its way in. All it takes is one person willing to see past the surface, one heart open enough to give love a chance. They say every cloud has a silver lining, but in my case, the darkness itself became my greatest blessing. Through losing my sight, I found a way to truly see what matters most in life. The world I experience now, rich with sounds, scents, and textures, has taught me that there are many ways to understand beauty. My human says that sometimes we must lose something to gain something greater, and I think she might be right. My journey from the streets to this loving home has changed not just my life, but my entire understanding of what's possible. The fear that once consumed me has been replaced by confidence, the loneliness by love. Each step of my recovery, each small victory, has shown me that limitations only exist if we accept them. My human never saw my blindness as a barrier. She saw it as just another part of who I am. The construction site accident that nearly ended my life instead became my salvation. Without that terrible fall, I might never have found my way to this remarkable human who saw past my broken body and dark eyes to the spirit within. She says I taught her as much as she taught me. About resilience, about trust, about seeing with the heart. Together, we've discovered that the strongest bonds are built on understanding and patience. Every day brings new discoveries, even now. I've learned that happiness isn't about what you can or cannot do. It's about finding joy in what you have. My world may be dark, but it's filled with more light than I ever knew possible. The warmth of sun on my fur, the sound of my human's laugh, the comfort of our daily routines. These are the true treasures of life. To those who think disabilities make a life less worth living, I wish I could show them how full and rich my world has become. My blindness isn't a tragedy, it's simply part of my story. Through it, I've discovered strengths I never knew I had, developed senses I never knew could be so acute, and found love I never thought possible. Other cats still come to our door, drawn by the food and water my human leaves out. Sometimes I hear her making calls, arranging help for them, just as she once helped me. Our home has become a beacon of hope for other lost souls, proving that second chances are always possible. Every rescue story reminds me of my own journey and makes me grateful for the twist of fate that brought me here. The darkness that once seemed like my greatest enemy has become a familiar friend. It no longer represents fear or limitation. Instead, it's the canvas on which I paint my world with sounds, scents, and sensations. My human has helped me see that what others might view as a disability can actually be a unique way of experiencing life's beautiful moments. Life continues to surprise me with its gifts. Each day brings new adventures, new experiences, new reasons to be thankful. The woman who rescued me has become more than just my savior. She's my family, my guide, my constant companion. Together, we've created a life that proves love doesn't need eyes to see, only a heart willing to embrace all possibilities. They say cats have 9 lives, but I think what matters most is what we do with the life we're given. My journey from a scared, blind stray to a loved and confident cat has taught me that every life has value. Every story matters. Sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as challenges, and the darkest moments can lead to the brightest futures. To anyone who thinks hope is lost, who believes their differences make them unworthy of love, I wish I could share what I've learned. That true sight comes from the heart, that strength grows from adversity, and that love can light up even the darkest world. My story isn't just about survival, it's about learning to thrive, about finding light in the darkness, and about the transformative power of unconditional love.